Her name was Loretta. In 1953, she pulled a card from her apron pocket and set it on the kitchen counter. Her doctor had printed it himself on the mimeograph machine in the back of his office. It listed what she was allowed to eat: breakfast, half a grapefruit, 1 soft-boiled egg, black coffee; lunch, 4 saltines, a cup of clear bouillon; dinner, 3 ounces of meat, a cup of cooked greens. He handed the card to every woman who mentioned her weight at a routine appointment. She followed it without question. She had no reason to question it. His name was at the top. These are 25 diet recipes and methods that were standard practice in American homes through the 1950s and into the 1960s. Every one of them was believed to work. Most of them did work in some narrow technical sense, and nearly all of them have since disappeared, pulled from cookbook printings, reclassified, quietly removed from pharmacy shelves, or simply stopped being passed from mother to daughter somewhere along the way. This channel is called Margaret's American Apron, and this is exactly what we are here to do. Dust off what was taken. Look at it honestly. Respect the women who used it. If that is why you are here, subscribe and stay with me. Number 25. The Grapefruit Half. Half a grapefruit cut across the middle, a maraschino cherry placed in the center, a dusting of cinnamon over the top. This was breakfast, not a side dish, the whole morning meal. The Hollywood 18-day diet had been circulating since the 1930s, and by 1950 had settled into kitchens from Cincinnati to Sacramento. The claim was simple: an enzyme in the grapefruit burned fat before the body could store it. That claim was printed in magazines and handed out at doctors' offices as fact. The enzyme theory was never confirmed, but the diet stripped calories and the weight did come off, and so the grapefruit stayed on the table for decades. The maraschino cherry is gone. Red dye number 4, used in those cherries through most of the 1960s, was removed from the FDA's approved list in 1976 after studies linked it to cancer in animals. The cherry left the recipe. The recipe followed not long after. Number 24, the Bouillon and Saltine Lunch. 4 saltines, a china cup of hot beef bouillon, a glass of water. That was lunch. Reducing cards from the 1950s recommended this combination specifically because it felt like eating. The salt and the warmth signaled to the body that a meal had occurred. Women sat at the kitchen table with this after the children left for school. Some used the good china because that made it feel deliberate. The sodium in a daily bouillon regimen would alarm any modern cardiologist. At the time, no one was measuring it. The reducing card said it was safe. She had no reason to look further than the card. Number 23. The Metrecal Shake. In 1959, Mead Johnson introduced Metrecal, vanilla, chocolate, butterscotch. It looked like a milkshake. It was 225 calories. Women drank 1 for lunch and 1 for dinner and called it a diet. Metrecal was the first commercial meal replacement shake sold to the American public, and it created an entire industry in under 2 years. Grocery stores gave it its own shelf. Ladies' magazines published Metrecal mousse recipes. Metrecal frozen dessert. Metrecal stirred into coffee. The product itself was never formally pulled. It simply lost the market as competitors arrived. But the original formula contained saccharin at concentrations the FDA would later flag. The shake that sold 40 million units in its first 2 years faded from shelves without an announcement. One day it was there, then it was not. Number 22. The Saccharin Gelatin Mold. She made it in a copper ring mold. Lime gelatin, saccharin tablets dissolved in the warm liquid, canned grapefruit sections suspended throughout, a mound of cottage cheese in the center. This was the reducing salad, and it appeared in every diet cookbook printed between 1950 and 1968. Church women brought it to potlucks. Doctors recommended it. One reader who grew up in that era wrote that her mother made this dish every Sunday and set it in the icebox to firm overnight. She thought it was a treat. Saccharin had been in continuous use since the 1880s and was considered safe. In 1977, the FDA proposed a ban after a Canadian study linked high doses to bladder cancer in laboratory animals. The proposal was overturned by Congress, but the resulting warning label requirement changed everything. Saccharin gelatin molds did not appear on the table with cancer warnings attached. The recipe quietly left the cookbooks. The ring mold went back to the top shelf. Number 21. The Ayds reducing candy. Caramel, also butterscotch, also chocolate fudge. A small cardboard box with a smiling woman on the front. You ate one piece 20 minutes before each meal. The box promised a loss of up to 10 pounds in 5 days without dieting or exercising. That promise was on the packaging in 1937 when the product entered the market and was still there in 1972. The appetite suppressant was first benzocaine, which numbed the mouth and made food taste like nothing, and later phenylpropanolamine, a drug eventually linked to stroke. The FDA restricted the formula. The product lost its name in the 1980s for reasons that had nothing to do with its ingredients and was renamed, then discontinued. The candy your grandmother kept in the dresser drawer was pharmaceutical. The box said candy. Those are not the same thing. She had no way to know they were different. Number 20. The Vinegar Tonic. 2 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar in a glass of warm water, taken before each meal. This was not considered a folk remedy. It appeared in printed diet pamphlets through the 1950s, was recommended in the reducing columns of women's magazines, and was sold in bottled form at pharmacies under names like Slender Malt and Diet Right Tonic. The claim was that acetic acid suppressed appetite and accelerated fat metabolism. Modern research has produced limited support for the appetite effect. At the time, it needed no research. It was simply what reducing women did before dinner. The pharmacy tonics were quietly reclassified when their secondary additives, often thyroid extract and diuretic compounds blended in, drew FDA attention in the mid-1960s. The plain vinegar tonic survived. The bottled versions did not. Number 19, the 7-day soup. 1 head of cabbage, 6 large onions, 1 can of whole tomatoes, 1 bunch of celery, 1 can of beef consommé, a packet of dry onion soup mix for flavor. You made a large pot on Sunday, you ate it for 7 days, nothing else, or nearly nothing. This was the cabbage soup diet, and it traveled through American neighborhoods in the 1950s the way recipes moved then, passed from woman to woman, copied out by hand onto index cards, tucked inside the front cover of The Joy of Cooking. It had no published author, no traceable origin. It promised a 10 to 17 pound loss in a week. The weight it removed was primarily water. The protocol approached malnourishment if followed strictly. Most women who did it did not tell their doctors. It was a kitchen secret. The doctors who might have callo, net against it, were never asked. Number 18. The Egg and Grapefruit Day. Half a grapefruit and 1 egg at breakfast. Hard-boiled egg and half a grapefruit at noon. 3 eggs and half a grapefruit at dinner. Nothing else. Not one other item. This variation of the Hollywood diet circulated in the late 1950s as a fast solution before a wedding, a reunion, a summer trip. Women did it for 3 days, some for 7. An all-egg, all-grapefruit protocol delivered almost no dietary fat, almost no carbohydrate, and a calorie count below 800 for the day. It worked in the short term. The weight came off. What also came off? Potassium, electrolytes, the ability to think clearly by afternoon. Women who followed it described feeling cold, lightheaded, not quite present. They called that feeling succeeding. Number 17. The Consommé Supper. Dinner was a cup of clear beef consommé heated on the stove, poured into a mug, and taken sitting down at the table. No bread, no crackers, no other food until breakfast. Magazines framed this as a kind of refinement. The woman who could eat lightly at dinner, who could refuse the bread basket, who could push back the dessert plate, she was held up as composed, self-possessed. The consommé gave her something warm to hold, something that made the absence of food feel chosen rather than imposed. The sodium in commercial consommé was not something the reducing articles measured or mentioned. It was simply what you drank when you were being disciplined about dinner. Number 16. The Cyclamate Dessert. A gelatin base with cyclamate sweetener dissolved in. Canned fruit, carefully drained. A layer of low-fat cream cheese whipped smooth. This was the diet dessert, and it was on the table after dinner 3 nights a week across the country. Cyclamates were introduced as a sugar substitute in the early 1950s and used in home cooking, packaged foods, and canned diet beverages. They tasted cleaner than saccharin. They dissolved in hot liquid without bitterness. In October 1969, the FDA banned them entirely after a study linked high doses to bladder cancer in rats. There was no phase-out. Products were pulled from shelves. Home cooks who had bought cyclamate tablets found them gone within weeks. The diet dessert recipes that called for them were cut from subsequent cookbook printings. Some women kept the old tablets in the back of the pantry for years after the ban, using them up slowly, not wasting anything. Number 15, the No-Utensil Lunch. Woman's Day ran it in 1952. Remove utensils from the lunch setting, and you physically cannot eat certain foods. No knife means no butter on the toast. No fork means no macaroni. No cake, no sausage. You are left with what fits in the hand: an apple, a few crackers, a piece of cheese. The article called it a reducing plan. It required no pills, no doctor, no prescription, no cost, just fewer spoons on the table. One viewer wrote that she found this clipped from a magazine inside her grandmother's recipe box, folded small, tucked under the church casserole cards. Her grandmother had never mentioned it. Nobody talked about these things. The method never became a named diet with a book behind it. It stayed a clipping in a drawer, a workaround among workarounds. Number 14, the Dexedrine Breakfast. It was a pill taken with coffee before the morning meal, but it changed the meal entirely. Dexedrine, one brand name for dextroamphetamine, was prescribed by family physicians through the 1950s and early 1960s to women who mentioned their weight at an appointment. The prescription changed what breakfast became. Women who took it reported no appetite in the morning. Coffee was enough. A single piece of toast felt like too much. Doctors called this therapeutic. The FDA reclassified amphetamines as Schedule II controlled substances in 1970. Women who had been refilling the prescription monthly for 6 or 7 years found it simply gone. Some of them did not know what had changed. They had forgotten what ordinary hunger felt like. When it came back all at once, they did not recognize it. Number 13, the protein plate. 3 ounces of lean meat, weighed on a kitchen scale, half a cup of green beans, cooked without butter, a small mound of cottage cheese measured by the tablespoon, no bread, no starch, no sauce. This was the reducing plate appearing in diet columns as early as 1954 and becoming standard language in women's magazines by the end of the decade. Women bought small postal scales specifically for portioning their own food. The meat was usually chicken or veal. The family got the rest of the roast. She weighed her portion and set it aside. Then she served everyone else. That arrangement, her separate measured plate against the family's full table, was never named in any reducing article. It was simply assumed. She cooked, she served, she ate less. That was the plan. Number 12, the Grapefruit Enzyme Capsule. By 1960, several companies had extracted what they described as the active fat-burning compound from grapefruit and put it into a capsule sold at pharmacies without a prescription. The label said it delivered the same principle as the Hollywood diet, now concentrated, now available without eating grapefruit 3 times a day. The enzyme claim was no more supported in capsule form than it had ever been on the plate. But the capsules sold steadily alongside the Ayds candy and the Saccharin tablets and the Bouillon cubes. In the mid-1960s, the FDA began requiring demonstrable evidence of efficacy for over-the-counter supplements making specific health claims. Most grapefruit extract products disappeared from shelves within 18 months of that requirement. The grapefruit remained. The caps. Oolay did not. Number 11, the steak and tomato day. 1 thick sirloin steak, broiled plain with only salt. 3 whole tomatoes, sliced, dressed with lemon juice. Nothing else for the entire day. This single food pairing appeared in celebrity diet columns through the mid-1950s and was associated with actresses and socialites who needed visible results quickly before a public appearance. The tomato was the alkalizing agent. The steak was the protein anchor, no carbohydrates. Total calories depended on the size of the steak, but most versions of the plan landed below 1,000 for the day. It was not meant to be sustained. No one said it was. It was a one-day tool for a specific moment, a dress that needed to close by Saturday. Women reached for it the way they reached for the iron. Useful, immediate, not questioned. Number 10. The Cottage Cheese Lunch. Dry curd cottage cheese scooped into a perfect mound on a china plate. Canned peach halves arranged in a ring around it. Iceberg lettuce leaves underneath. A shake of paprika on top for color. This was attractive enough to serve at a luncheon, and women did. Bridge clubs plated it on the good china. Church groups made it for each other. It appeared in the reducing sections of every general cookbook printed in the 1950s. The dry curd variety, low-fat by nature, genuinely high in protein, has largely disappeared from grocery shelves. Most cottage cheese sold today is creamed. The recipe is still in the old cookbooks. The ingredient has become nearly impossible to find. The dish remains technically possible. Finding what you need to make it is the problem. Number 9. The Tapeworm Capsule. She did not call it that. The catalog called it a sanitized parasite tablet. A small capsule mail-ordered from a back-page advertisement in a confession magazine, swallowed before breakfast with a full glass of water. The premise was straightforward, and the premise was technically true. A tapeworm in the intestine consumes a portion of the calories that pass through it. The host loses weight without changing what she eats. By the 1950s, the practice had moved largely into rumor and the back pages of unsigned advertisements. Most of those capsules contained powdered material that no laboratory would have called a viable parasite. The genuine product did exist. The FDA pulled the last verified suppliers in the early 1960s. The myth outlived the product. Number 8. The Benzedrine Reducing Plan. Smith, Kline, and French had developed Benzedrine as a decongestant. After the war, they redirected the marketing toward women's weight. By the late 1940s, Benzedrine and its successors were being prescribed in family doctor offices across the country. The prescription changed the architecture of the entire day. Women who took it before breakfast were not hungry at breakfast, were not hungry at lunch, made dinner for the family, and ate very little of it. The reducing happened. Doctors called it effective. What it also did: elevated heart rate, disrupted sleep, built dependency quietly over months. When the bottle ran out, the appetite returned heavier than it had been before. The pills were reclassified. The prescriptions ended. The hunger did not. Number 7. The Thyroid Extract Regimen. A woman sits in a doctor's office in 1958. She does not have a thyroid condition. She has mentioned her weight. Her doctor writes her a prescription for thyroid extract. This was documented in medical literature as accepted practice. Thyroid hormone raises metabolic rate. A raised rate burns more calories. A healthy woman taking thyroid hormone will lose weight. She will also, over years, sustain damage to her own thyroid's capacity to produce hormone independently. The gland quiets when the synthetic version takes over. If the prescription ends, the gland does not simply restart. Women who took thyroid extract through the 1950s for weight loss found this out in their 60s when the bone density scans came back, when the fractures began. The prescription had not mentioned any of that. Number 6. The Rainbow Pill Protocol. Pink, yellow, white. She took all three. An amphetamine for appetite, a diuretic to clear water weight, a thyroid hormone to push the metabolism harder. Sometimes a fourth tablet, a laxative compound, was added for speed of result. This was not a fringe product. It was prescribed by licensed physicians through the 1950s and into the 1960s. Women took the combination to lose weight before a daughter's wedding. Before summer, the FDA began investigating after patients began dying. Cardiac arrest, stroke, kidney failure. The pills were banned in 1968. The year before the ban, doctors were still writing the prescriptions. She was not doing something reckless. She was doing what her doctor had told her to do. His name was on the bottle. That had always been enough. Number 5. The DES-treated chicken. Diethylstilbestrol, DES. A synthetic estrogen approved for use in poultry and cattle feed in 1947. It made animals grow faster on less feed. It made the meat cheaper. Women bought it at the grocery store because it was the meat that was there. The FDA banned DES in poultry in 1959 after residue was found in edible tissue. It remained approved for cattle use until 1979. Women who had been told that lean chicken was the cornerstone of the reducing diet were eating DES-treated chicken through the entire decade without knowing it. The ban did not appear in Good Housekeeping. It appeared in regulatory filings and trade publications. She did not read the trade publications. She read what her doctor recommended and bought what the grocery store carried. Those were the two sources she had. Number 4, the Saccharin tablet in the sugar bowl. She kept them beside the spoon. Little white tablets, the forerunner of Sweet and Low. No brand name on the tin, just Saccharin, 10 cents for a bottle of 500 at the pharmacy. She dissolved them in coffee, in tea, in the vinegar tonic before dinner, in the warm water for the gelatin mold. Saccharin had been in use since 1879. Teddy Roosevelt had defended it publicly. By the 1950s, it was unremarkable, simply what a reducing woman used instead of sugar. The 1977 proposed FDA ban placed a mandatory warning label on every product containing it. Warning: use of this product may be hazardous to your health. The label remained for more than 2 decades. Congress repealed the requirement in 2000 after further research found no demonstrated link in human populations. She had used the tablets every single day for 20 years. She found out about the warning label the same way she found out about everything. Someone mentioned it after the fact. Number 3. The Calorie Card Breakfast. He printed it on the office mimeograph. Half a grapefruit, 1 soft-boiled egg, black coffee, nothing else until noon. Some offices laminated the card, some tucked it in a small envelope with the doctor's name printed on the front. Women propped them on the kitchen counter against the coffee can and followed them the way they followed any recipe, with fidelity, with the assumption that the person who wrote it possessed knowledge they did not. The card had no FDA oversight, no nutritional review board behind it. It was a physician's personal protocol, reproduced on a machine and handed out to women who wanted to weigh less. Some cards were reasonable, some were not. Your grandmother had no way to determine which she had received. She trusted the name at the top. She had been given every reason to. Number 2. The Girdle before dinner, not a recipe, and yet it appeared in some form on nearly every reducing list ever published. The Playtex Living Girdle, the Merry Widow, the Warner's Concentrate. She wore it from the moment she dressed until she undressed at night, and she wore it to every meal she served. The compression was genuine. Finishing a full plate while wearing a properly fitted girdle was physically difficult. Not from willpower, from the simple fact that there was no room for the stomach to expand. Women ate less at dinner not because they were disciplined, but because the garment made it uncomfortable not to. This was understood. It was never stated plainly in any magazine. The photographs showed the resulting silhouette. They did not show the red marks the boning left across her skin when she finally took it off. That part happened in private. It always happened in private. Number 1. The half grapefruit at 6 in the morning. She was up before the children. The kitchen was quiet and still. She cut the grapefruit across the middle the way her mother had shown her and set it on the small plate she kept for herself, the one with the blue border. She ate it standing at the counter because she was already starting the oatmeal for everyone else. Black coffee from the percolator. That was her breakfast. Not exactly a choice. An instruction she had received so many times from so many directions. Her doctor, her magazine, her neighbor who had lost 12 pounds before Easter, that it had become simply what she did in the morning before the house woke up. She ate the reducing breakfast while she made the real breakfast for the rest of the family. That recipe was never written in any cookbook. It was passed woman to womb, and without anyone ever putting it down on paper. These 25 protocols disappeared in different ways. Some were pulled by the FDA, some were dropped from cookbook reprints, some simply stopped being passed from mother to daughter. All of them were once standard practice in American homes. The women who followed them trusted the doctor on the card, the recipe in the cookbook, the brand on the candy box. They were doing exactly what they had been told by the people they had been told to trust. If you grew up in a kitchen where one of these was on the counter, a saccharin tin, an Ayds box, a calorie card propped against the coffee can, leave the name in the comments. And if this is the kind of history you want more of, the suppressed recipes and the methods that quietly vanished, subscribe and stay. There is more here than I will get to in one video.